morning sun spilled across the school courtyard as students poured in through the gates, their chatter filling the air with casual gossip and jokes about homework, games and weekend plans. Then silence rippled through the crowd as she appeared at the far end of the walkway, her boots striking the pavement in a steady rhythm, her jacket patterned in dark green and brown camo that looked like it belonged in the woods, not in the polished world of classrooms and lockers. Heads turned one after another, whispers rose quickly, and laughter followed, carrying like sparks through dry grass. She kept moving, her backpack slung across one shoulder, the straps worn and faded as if it had seen more miles than anyone else could imagine. Each step made her stand out more, the camo fabric clashing with the neon sneakers and pastel jackets around her. The same scene had played out for weeks now, yet her pace never changed, her eyes always locked straight ahead. At the lockers, the murmurs grew sharper, voices rising just enough for her to hear. One boy elbowed his friend, smirking as he asked if she was on her way to invade the cafeteria. Another girl snickered, calling her a wannabe soldier playing dress-up, but she moved past them without a glance, her boots thudding on the tiled floor in a rhythm that carried its own authority. Her locker door creaked open, the metal scarred with scratches from years of use. She placed her backpack inside with slow, deliberate care, as though even here she refused to rush or stumble. The laughter behind her rose louder, echoing off the walls. Someone tossed a paper ball that bounced harmlessly against her shoulder, yet she did not turn. She adjusted her jacket and closed the locker with a firm metallic click. The bell rang, pulling the crowd into the current of rushing bodies, but she walked against it, her stride calm, her gaze unwavering. Teachers glanced up from their notes, eyebrows raised at the sight of her uniform, but they said nothing, perhaps out of confusion, perhaps out. The hallway buzzed with its usual noise after lunch. Lockers slammed, conversations collided with one another, and sneakers squeaked against polished floors. But beneath all of it, she moved in silence, her boots steady, her camo uniform brushing against the lockers. With each step, eyes followed her from every angle, some wide with curiosity, others narrowed with ridicule, yet her expression never broke. She walked as if she carried orders no one else could see. Whispers spread like wildfire once again, voices dipping into mocking tones. The girl in camo must think she is in the army, one boy said too loudly while his friends laughed. Another girl leaned close to her friend and muttered that maybe the camo was just a disguise for having no style, but the laughter faded strangely when she passed by, her posture so rigid and sure that the hallway itself seemed to bend around her silence. She reached her next classroom, the door swinging shut behind her, the chatter from inside cutting short. The teacher looked up, startled for just a moment, then nodded and returned to writing on the board. She slipped into her seat near the back window, once again the same seat she always claimed, her gaze drawn not to her classmates or the chalkboard, but to the sky beyond the glass, her fingers drumming lightly on the desk in a rhythm only she knew. As the lesson dragged on, the hum of fluorescent lights filled the quiet moments. Her classmates whispered back and forth, exchanging notes and laughter, but she remained still, her eyes drifting to the horizon beyond the football field, her jaw tightening ever so slightly each time the faintest tremor of sound reached her ears, the kind of vibration most would dismiss as passing traffic, but she knew better. She could feel it building. The teacher called on her suddenly, perhaps trying to test her attention, perhaps hoping to catch her off guard, but she answered calmly, her voice clear and steady without hesitation. Her classmates exchanged glances, surprised that she had been. The students crowded together in the middle of the football field, their laughter fading into an easy silence as the low rhythm in the air grew stronger. The thumping sound carried across the open sky like the beating of a giant heart. The girl in camo stood apart, her boots rooted to the turf, her gaze never leaving the horizon, her posture sharp as if she were bracing for impact. At first a few still tried to laugh it off. One boy shouted that it was only construction noise, another claimed it was a train in the distance, but the words felt hollow even to them, their eyes darting upward nervously as the sound thickened, pressing against their ribs, each pulse vibrating through the soles of their shoes. The girl in camo lifted her chin slightly, her hand brushing against her jacket as though confirming something hidden beneath. The wind began to stir, blades of grass bending under sudden bursts of force, papers ripped from the hands of students scattering across the field. The crowd turned in circles trying to spot the source of the noise, but the sun burned too bright overhead. The sky looked empty, and yet the sound grew heavier, more insistent. Her eyes tracked a point above the tree line at the far edge of the campus, her jaw tightening with certainty. One girl near the bleachers clutched her friend's arm, asking if it was thunder rolling, and the friend shook her head wide-eyed as the vibrations rattled the metal seats. The football coach blew his whistle, shouting for everyone to clear the field, but his voice was swallowed by the pounding rhythm above. The girl in camo took a step forward against the growing gust of wind, her hair whipping across her face. Then the shadow appeared, faint at first, then darker, spreading across the grass like an approaching storm cloud. Students gasped, pointing upward, as the outline sharpened the body of a massive machine cutting through the air, the main rotor blades chopping furiously, their roar drowning every other sound, the tail rotor spinning in perfect parlor. The helicopter dropped lower, the roar of its engines shaking the ground so violently that students stumbled and fell across the field. Grass tore loose in great swirls flying into the air. The bleachers rattled with metallic groans, and yet she stood steady, her camo blending with the haze of boots fixed to the earth, her gaze locked on the open hatch as though nothing else in the world existed. The main rotor spun with a fury, slicing the air into a storm, the tail rotor whirring sharp as a blade. The landing skids reached downward until with a bone-deep thud they struck the turf. The ground shivered under the weight of the machine, dust clouds rising so thick they cloaked half the field. The crowd pressed back against fences, clutching each other, their voices drowned in the relentless thunder. The girl in camo took one step forward into the storm. Her classmates stared in disbelief, their laughter from hours earlier now dead in their throats, replaced by open-mouthed shock. She moved closer, her jacket flaring in the blast of the rotors, while the rest of them shielded their faces. The soldiers inside the helicopter shifted, one of them kneeling at the door scanning the field before raising a hand to signal her alone. Gasps swept through the students as she lifted her arm in response, her hand steady, her movements without hesitation. She kept walking across the grass, a figure sharp against the cloud of dust, each step unbroken by the wind, her eyes locked with the soldier at the door as though this meeting had been written long before this day. The coach tried again to blow his whistle, his orders lost in the chaos. He pushed at students, urging them to retreat from the field, but many froze, unable to move, their eyes locked on the lone girl striding toward the roaring machine, while the soldiers inside watched her with recognition rather than surprise. The helicopter door slid wider. Two soldiers stepped forward, their gear catching the sunlight, rifles slung across their chests, helmets gleam. Inside the roaring belly of the helicopter, the air vibrated with mechanical thunder, the metal floor shuddering beneath her boots as she steadied herself against the bulkhead. Soldiers closed ranks around her, their movements efficient, their eyes sharp and scanning the field below. Yet when they turned to her, there was no question in their gaze, only recognition, as though she had stepped into a place where she had always belonged. Outside, the students clung to fences, their eyes stinging with dust, their laughter silenced, replaced by the kind of quiet born of disbelief. Some shielded their faces, others pointed upward, shouting words no one could hear over the rotors, but all of them stared at the girl framed in the hatchway, her camo jacket snapping in the wind, the soldiers treating her as one of their own. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset, clipped and precise, the helicopter tilting slightly as he adjusted the throttle, the main rotor screaming with a steady rhythm. She reached for the overhead strap, steadying herself against the roll. The soldier beside her offered a nod, a silent confirmation that she had handled this before. Her classmates could only watch from below, mouths open as the machine lifted higher. The coach staggered into the center of the field, his whistle dangling useless from his hand, his face pale as he squinted through the dust. He shouted for the students to clear away, but they did not move. They were transfixed by the sight above, the sight of the girl who had walked among them, mocked for her uniform, now swallowed into the sky by a machine of war. The helicopter tilted its nose forward, engines straining as it began to climb, the tail rotor cutting sharp patterns into the air. The soldiers inside buckled themselves into their seats, their helmets gleaming under the harsh cabin light. One soldier tapped her shoulder, gesturing toward an empty seat, but she shook her head, remaining on her feet, her eyes fixed out the hatch at the crowd that had once laughed at. The roar of the rotors filled the cabin, the metal floor vibrating under each pulse of the blades, the air thick with the smell of oil and steel. She held the strap above her head, steadying herself as the helicopter pitched through the wind. The soldiers around her buckled in their gear, clattering with each shift, yet when they looked at her there was no confusion, only familiarity, as though her presence had been expected. One soldier leaned closer, his voice raised over the engine noise, his helmet tilted forward. He asked if she was ready, his words simple, his tone firm. She met his gaze without hesitation and nodded once. The soldier gave a short grin before fastening his harness tighter. He reached into his vest, pulling out a small patch, its colors faded, its edges frayed. He pressed it into her hand silently. She curled her fingers around it, her eyes narrowing with recognition. The pilot's voice crackled again through the cabin, loud and precise, giving a set of coordinates. The co-pilot repeated them back, their tone calm as if this mission was routine, but the soldiers stole glances at her as though this flight was not routine at all. She tightened her grip on the patch, her thumb running across the embroidered letters, too faint for the others to see, her chest rising in a slow, deliberate breath. She moved toward the bench seating, lowering herself beside a soldier who shifted to make room, his rifle slung across his chest, his eyes scanning her boots, then her jacket. Before he finally spoke, he said the field looked chaotic down there. She tilted her head, acknowledging his words, but offering no reply. Her silence seemed to satisfy him. He turned back toward the hatch, his hand resting casually on the grip of his weapon, his posture alert but calm. The soldier across from her leaned forward, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. He said they had been briefed about her before deployment. His words carried weight, the others listening without comment. He added that the briefing had been thin, only frag. The horizon stretched wide as the helicopter cut through the clouds, the sunlight flickering across the spinning rotors below. The earth rolled out in endless fields and shadow tree lines. The soldiers shifted in their seats, tightening straps, checking buckles, their rifles pressed close against their chests. One of them raised a hand, giving the pilot a silent signal. The others nodded in response, all movement efficient and wordless, yet through it all their eyes returned again and again to her. She sat still, the patch clutched tight in her palm, the edges digging into her skin, her thoughts steady even as the engines roared. She had been through this before, though none of them knew how deep her history ran. The soldier beside her finally leaned closer, his voice carrying over the noise, asking her why a school field, why then, why now? She turned her face toward the hatch, the wind striking her cheeks, her silence sharp and final. The pilot's voice came through again, clipped and steady. They were less than 10 minutes from the waypoint altitude, holding engines stable. The soldiers moved as one, their gear rattling as they prepared for descent. The soldier across from her leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, his voice lower than before. He said, she was not on their manifest, not in any of their briefings, beyond a single line that read passenger critical. Her gaze flicked to him, then to the insignia on his chest. Recognition sparked and quickly faded. Her lips parted as if to speak, but she closed them again. The soldier waited, his patience clear, his curiosity sharp, but she gave nothing. The patch stayed hidden in her palm, glowing faintly as the sun cut across it. The man noticed the light, but said nothing, only shifting back into his seat, his eyes never leaving hers.